Hello everyone, welcome to this self-knowledge course that we broadcast every Wednesday and Friday, the phase A of this course. And we are going to see now topic number 15, and we are going to be learning today about the ego, the personality, and the essence. So we learn to differentiate when each one of these parts of us are manifesting, so we can develop that ability of self-observation that is very useful, so we make inner changes. So let me check if everything is okay here with the broadcast. So we start with today's lecture. Let me just a second. Yes, everything's okay. So today, ego, personality, and essence. The objective of this topic will be to teach us to differentiate the activity of each of these, to learn to observe and to distinguish in each one of our acts when the ego is manifesting, when is the essence manifesting, and when the personality. To understand each of these, we are going to analyze them separately, and we are going to see what is the ego in us, what is the personality, and what is the essence. So we need to be clear about this. And we are going to see how each one of them manifests. So we are going to see few examples of certain situations, and we are going to be learning to differentiate the ego from the personality and the essence. And well, to start this topic, it's important that we understand first this part, that we get to understand that there exist different types of acts. And the first type of acts are the acts of the ego, or the recurrences. And these are, or this happens as we are not aware of our inner world, as we are not practicing the self-observation, and we all the time are letting our psychological defects or ego to manifest instead of our consciousness. That is, we are living our lives, and when the anger wants to manifest, when we are faced with a situation that make us arise our anger, we just let it manifest, and those are the acts of the ego. Or if laziness wants to manifest, now we let the laziness manifest. We feed our laziness, we act with laziness, we are acting by the ego. Or the lust is manifesting. Someone is extremely attractive to us, and we let the lust manifest in our mind, in our emotion, in our words, in our actions. So those are the acts of the ego. And these acts, when you start to observe them, you see that they are all the time repeated, over and over again. And for that, they are all the time generating that we need to get to suffer their consequences. And that consequences tend to be greater and greater, since the ego grows each time we let it manifest. So we are going to be experiencing harder consequences each time. As we studied in the lecture in which we talk about the law of recurrence, which was the topic number 12, we saw that our ego is from one existence to another, trying to repeat the same thing, trying to make us do the same things, to take the same decisions, to make the same mistakes, existence after existence. And in that way, we are, or the ego ensures that he is going to be fed, and we turn into mechanical people, because we live things in one life and we die and we come to another existence, and as we come with the very same psychological defects, we end up repeating the same actions, making the same mistakes, etc. And thanks to this, we all come to a existence with a marked destiny, where everything that we are going to live is already written. everything that is going to happen to us and how we are going to react. And why? Because we are constantly driven by our own ego, and we can only act until under its mechanical conditioning, until we decide to awaken our consciousness and start self-observing, make ourselves aware of the existence of those many people that live inside of us, that are the different parts of our ego, and we start eliminating them. That way we are going to start breaking up with the acts of the ego and with the recurrences. Well, the second type of acts that exist are the accidents. And this happens because we have our consciousness asleep, and because we are all the time distracted, all the time fascinated with this world. And these are acts that are not they are not in our line of destiny. For example, it may not be in our destiny line that we should die by being hit by a car, let's say at the age of 25 years. Probably not. But since in this existence we create a new psychological defect, which is the self of the cell phone, that is all the time absorbed by the cell phone, that even walking is looking at the cell phone, and we go when we cross the street without any precaution, and someone runs over us. And what happens that these types of acts are what cause new recurrences. Since, for example, in the case that I'm explaining, with that accident, a new recurrence is generated, and for our next life, at the same age, we will already be so absorbed with a cell phone or with another technology, perhaps more advanced, but the defect will be the same and will cause us to act the same way and to have the same accident in our next existence. I don't know if you are understanding me. But there is also a third type of act that are the conscious acts. And these are the acts that will prevent accidents from occurring, and as they will prevent also new recurrences from occurring. And they are the ones that will allow us to get out of our ego's mechanic, and will free ourselves from all the recurrences that we need to live by destiny and their consequences. But what happens that for conscious acts to take place, we must be making constant efforts and conscious efforts to wake up from moment to moment, to live in the present moment, in the here and now, to be practicing the self-observation, to be practicing the psychological death, to be in self-remembering, so we can get to observe when the ego wants to manifest. So we eliminate that and we let our consciousness to manifest. When we are living the present moment, when we are making our effort to achieve that inner silence, so the wisdom of our consciousness can manifest, then we can experience conscious acts. And well, now that we just see this, let's see what is the ego, what is the personality, and what is the essence. Well, the ego actually is known by different names. Probably everybody knows exactly the meaning of ego, but you can see this list and you can easily see a term that you can relate to. And for example, the ego is known as the selves or the psychological eyes. That is one of the way that are referring to the ego in us, and is referring to that multiplicity that we are internally. Internally, we are actually a legion. And each one of our different ways of being are our psychological eyes. And we can observe how they manifest in us from moment to moment. We can see like the moody self, or the impatient, when we or the distracted, or the optimistic, or we can see that in some moments manifest the lazy self, or the envious self, or the coward self, or the tyrant self, or the afraid one. So actually, that is an endless list of all the different ways of being that live in our interior that are our ego. Actually, in the Buddhism, for example, they are known as the psychological aggregates. But also, the ego is known as defects or errors or mistakes. Each one of those flaws or defective forms that we can find in us, and that as defects act in a wrong way, generating damage to ourselves and to others. It is also known as desires or temptations, all those temptations or desires that move in us and lead us to give in to our lowest instincts. And it's also known as the instincts, those low instincts that we have. And that we usually want to see outside of these temptations. We tend to blame an external entity, and churches, religions, etc., have taught us that Satan is out of ourselves, that there is an external devil. But when we manage to understand that what we call God and devil is not, it doesn't reside in any other place but within ourselves, then we get to understand that this devil, Satan, or for example, the Set's red demons, as they were known in the ancient Egypt, are nothing more than the ego that live inside each one of us. In Christianity, for example, they are called sins. And we know, for example, the 7 deadly sins, which are laziness, greed, lust, pride, anger, gluttony, and envy. And these are nothing more than like the 7 main heads of the legion that is our ego. But the ego is also known as injustice, ignorance, pain, suffering, since it is the ego that causes to act unfairly, and that we cannot like come out from ignorance, and is the cause that we constantly experience pain and suffering. And it is also known as inner darkness or trapped consciousness, as in each one of our psychological defects, there is a part of our consciousness that is trapped. It is also known as concepts, the wrong concepts that we have. And all this are actually names that receive the ego or the psychological I or the selves. Well, in short, everything that manifests itself in us and that leads us to make mistakes, to harm others, or to harm ourselves, be it hatred, resentment, impatience, self-importance, selfishness, envy, violence, lies, betrayal, vices, sentimentalities, attachments, fears, beliefs, etc. And they are like manifested from moment to moment. All those are part of our ego, and our consciousness is trapped and conditioned within all our wrong ways of being. If we don't make the work to free ourselves from the ego, we will never develop our consciousness. 97% of our consciousness is trapped and conditioned by each of our wrong ways of being. So if we start to study ourselves, to get to know ourselves, to discover my reactions, my thoughts, to study my emotions, what I feel, what I do, what I say, I'm going to discover where is my consciousness trapped. There I'm going to discover what is that has my consciousness asleep. And if we work on that and we start eliminating all the details of our ego, we will be awakening consciousness. And well, it is important to know that the psychological selves are born from impressions that are not transformed in any of our existences. So every time that we are faced with a given situation and we became like identified with that situation, that energy that we put into that creates a new psychological I, or go to feed an old psychological I. And all this, with the passage of time in each of our existences, they have been like strengthened since our different psychological eyes grow every time that, due to lack of self-observation and psychological depth, we let them manifest in us, and they come and they feed on the energy of each one of our centers. Because as we started in topic number 4, we have 7 energetic centers. 5 of them, from here to here, are fallen, and they are all the time driven by the psychological defects, and they come from the 5th dimension because they belong to the 5th dimension, and they manifest in our different centers, in our emotions, in our intellectual center, in our sex, in our instincts, in our instinctive center, well, and in our motor center through our words and actions. And when they manifest, they feed on our energy. They has a molecular nature because they belong to the 5th dimension, which is the world of our emotion and of our thoughts. And they come to manifest through desire. They make us feel something, they make us think something, so we let them go and manifest through our words and through our actions. Something that is also important to understand is that every time we let a psychological defect manifest with our words or with our actions, when we let them pass just from emotions and thoughts and we let them manifest, we are generating karma. That is something that is good that we consider, so we see the importance of working on the self-observation and the elimination of all of our different ways of being. Each one of our psychological defects has its own portion of our personality. Our personality is like fraction in many portions, and each one of our ways of being has a portion of our personality, or has a way in which they control our personality. So you can see that your personality, or what you can say your way of being, we are going to study now what is personality. When you are angry, you manifest a way of being, like a personality, violent personality, for example. And when you are happy, you're a different person. And when you are sad, you're a different person. Because they take our personality and they use it, and it is like if each one has its own personality or its own way to manifest. And well, something important also to know about the ego is that there are old selves and new selves. For example, in these last existences, we have created many eyes that we didn't have before. Let's say that we are currently living our existence number 106, for example, or 7, because almost all humanity is currently living like their last existences in this turn. You know that for every turn in the wheel of samsara, we have the right to 108 existences as human. And well, for example, in other existences, we didn't have the eye of the cell phone, as I was saying, or the eye of the video games, for example, or the movie watcher, or the one who watches pornography, because, I don't know, 300 years ago didn't exist all those things that we have now, And when we get like fascinated with all those things and we put our energy into them, we create a new psychological defense. And actually, as the humanity is supposedly advancing, and we have every time new technology, this makes us have the false illusion that we are evolving, when internally it is actually we are going like quicker into involution. Because if we like reflect on this, we are going to see that as the technology and everything like advances, our psychological defects grows or have like more ways to fit and to manifest. Because I don't know, Lost, for example, um, couldn't be like fed the same as now, because now you can find, for example, porn everywhere. I mean, you can have a cell phone, you can find porn. So now it's like more easy to feed that self. Or for example, laziness can be now like or have now like more things to entertain ourselves. So we can now like stay a whole day in bed watching movies or series or so on. And that way we have now with the technology the capacity or the way to create new psychological defects. But we also have very old psychological eyes. We can see, for example, the eye of laziness is like the father of all the defects. And we can see like among the details of laziness are very old eyes, such as idleness, or the eye who likes to party, or the I am bored, which is another, or the disobedient, that is a very old defect, or the distracted one. And all of them are like details of our laziness. And if we actually analyze this, we can see that with the new eyes that we are creating, we are actually helping to feed the old eyes. For example, we in this existence very probably created the defect of the video games, and we can see how this defect comes like to feed many very old defects that we have, like laziness, like leisure and distraction, but also comes to like feed our murder selves, or the revenge, or the cruel, or the thieves, because in the video games we can actually do anything, and with our imagination and with our emotion and with our thoughts and everything that we are doing in the video games, we are actually feeding our wrong ways of being. And that is why you can see, it is real, that there is this young boy that all the time we're there in the video game, like killing people and stuff, and comes and kill a lot of people. And you see like old guys saying, oh my god, that was because he was all the time playing those ugly video games. But actually it is true. And the thing is that that guy comes with those defects very like strong from past existences, and in this one he was all the time feeding those defects with those types of video games, for example, or movies, for example. And he was like feeding all those things, and he already came with those like very big defects, and he ended up like making those mistakes. So it is actually true. And that is because the self evolves. So you start with like a little defect, but from the young age to when you are adult, you can see how the ego is evolving every time that you let the ego manifest and you add like different things. For example, we can see the lust. And when you were young, maybe the first I don't know, manifestation of lust in your life was through lasciviousness, because you saw someone that you like and you imagine, I don't know, that person naked or something like that. Or you watch some porn that I don't know, classroom, I'll say, partner, I think is how you say. in English, like gave you some porn and you watch that, and that way you started like feeding the yourself, your lustful self. But then you go to masturbation, and now every time you fall into masturbation, you are feeding your lust, and it is getting like bigger. And when you grow up, then you start with the fornication, that is having a couple to have sex and spilling your sexual energy, and then you try with the oral sex, and then you try with the anal sex, and etc. And but what happens that from one existence to another, the defects continue like evolving, because for example in one existence you try a little with homosexualism, for example, and in the next existence you come with those like desires because you already created that ego into past existence, and probably in that existence from a young age you are going to seek or you are going to like people from another sex. So the defect of the homosexuality will be like growing and growing, and you can end up maybe in that existence or in another falling into harder things like celibacy or like pedophilia, etc. And if you actually get to like reflect on this, you're going to understand that someone who sexually harmed a child didn't was not like created just because you can see someone that is, I don't know, someone, a guy that, I don't know, he looks like a good person, and it turns out that the guy is molesting child. And well, what happens that it is not something from a very existence. We have been carrying psychological defects from many existences, and they are coming every time stronger. And one day you feel that strong desire when the recurrence comes. I mean, when the time to the defect manifests, you feel that strong desire, and you don't refuse your desire, and you end up making the mistake. So it is important to start knowing ourselves and eliminating our ego. All selves, all our psychological defects can be voluntarily eliminated. And to do so, it is only what we need is just to be in a constant state of self-observation, of self-awareness, in self-remembering, to get to discover the manifestations of our ego, to see how they are manifesting as a desire, or how they are manifesting in our emotion, how they are manifesting in our mind, in our words, in our actions, and in our omissions. Because when we sometimes what our psychological defects do is that they make us not to do something. Like for example, if for resentment I don't help another, that is an act of our ego by omission. So that is something to take into account. And we need to get to observe what our ego does, why it does it, when it does it. And from moment to moment, we need to get to start comprehending when is the ego manifesting. And every time that we discover that a psychological defect is manifesting in my emotions or in my mind or in my words or in my actions, I'm going to eliminate it by asking my Divine Mother, which is the power of love of my consciousness, to eliminate that defect. For example, if I discover that I'm feeling resentment, well, I must eliminate that. Because if I judge that emotion, I am going to discover that it is not my consciousness. My consciousness doesn't feel resentment. My consciousness doesn't feel anger. My consciousness does not feel angry or fear or, I don't know, lustful or whatever. And if I discover that it is actually a defect manifesting in not my consciousness, I ask my Divine Mother to eliminate that emotion Or if it is manifesting in my mind, Divine Mother, eliminate that. Or if I already said the word, if I already said something that hurt someone, or anything that I get to judge that it is a defect, I must ask my Divine Mother to eliminate that defect. So I make myself sure that I'm not going to make again that mistake, that I'm not going to say that again, because I am actually eliminating the very causes of our wrong actions. And well, something that is important also to know is that if we don't make this work to eliminate our psychological defects voluntarily, and thus freeing our consciousness, they are going to be eliminated involuntarily. Because if we don't work on ourselves in the psychological death, when our 108 existences are exhausted, then we are going to pass through the process of involution that we started in the lecture number 8, in which all our psychological defects will die in a painful and an involuntary way, in a process that can take thousands of years, in these nine dental circle that are the process of involution. If you don't know what am I talking about here, you can go and see topic number 8 to study what is the evolution through the different kingdoms of nature and what is the involution. And once you pass thousands of years of pain through the process of involution that is known as hell in many religions, well, it has many other names also, but now I can only remember hell or Averno, for example, where your essence is going like to come out totally cleansed from all those defects to be connected again to the wheel to turn one more time. So it is important to understand the need to eliminate the ego in one existence as humans, to take advantage of this existence in which through this main you are receiving the knowledge. So you already know about what is your ego, so you already know about the psychological death, about the self-observation, that you take advantage of that and you start releasing your consciousness by eliminating your ego. And well, in order to observe the manifestation of the ego in us, we must realize something, and it is that, first I'm going to say that the ego manifests through desire. So we must begin to observe the different desires that we feel during the day to discover that desire, that and to get to judge what is the psychological defect that is actually making me feel that desire. So we get to understand that our consciousness is trapped within that desire. All of our fire, our internal fire, which is our consciousness, is currently trapped within all the kinds of desires that we feel during the day. During the day, we feel the desire to drink, the desire to fight, the desire to do nothing, the desire to masturbate, to criticize, etc. And if we feel the desire and we judge that desire, we actually are going to discover the psychological defect that is manifesting at that moment, and we can get to eliminate them. And if we learn to deny the constant desires of our ego, we will stop being slaves of desire, and we will rescue from the death of the defect, first the light, which is wisdom, and the fire, which is love, which is like encouragement, which is that capacity to do, and we are going to be feeding our consciousness with those liberated spark. And well, another thing to finish talking about the ego is that we need to remember that the ego originates the recurrence, because each one of our psychological defects, as I was explaining, they come with their commitments, and they are going to try to make us always fall in the same things and to make the same mistakes. So if we don't get out from that recurrence, we will keep repeating like the same lesson, existence after existence, until we get to learn what that situation is like there to teach us. Because everything that happens in our lives has like a lesson to give us. But if we fall into the same mistakes, we are never going to rescue the wisdom from that lesson. But if we self-observe ourselves, and we are facing such a situation, and we get to eliminate our psychological defects, and we get to rescue the consciousness and to act with consciousness in front of that situation, then we are going to be like learning everything that we need to learn from that, and we will not have to repeat the same situation, the same lesson again. So if in your life you are experiencing all the time the same kind of things, attracting the same kind of people, so you are all the time, you feel like you're a victim of the same circumstances, you need to observe yourself and make yourself like conscious that you are attracting those things because inside of you live that psychological defect that is feeding through that situation. And if you get to observe that, to discover that defect and to eliminate it, you are going to stop with those situations happening to you, and you are going to be changing your life for better. And well, that is all I have to say for the ego. Now let's talk a little about the personality. Personality is an energetic vehicle that will allow our psychological defects to manifest in us. When a baby is born, he doesn't have a personality created. He doesn't have like a way of being when he is just born. He is simple. And for this reason, the psychological defects, even though he brings his psychological defects from his past existence, they cannot like start entering in his body. They cannot like start manifesting themselves in him or her, because the little baby doesn't have yet a way of being. The little baby enjoys that beauty. In that baby, only the 3% of consciousness is like expressing. But what happens that as the child grows, he starts creating the personality, and then he is already forming like a way of being. And approximately 7 years old, he has completely created a personality, and that personality from there on is going to be all the time like a strength. And through that personality, all the psychological defects can openly enter the person. The personality is born in time and it dies in time. There is no future for personality. In each existence, we create a new personality, so the psychological defects can come and manifest. And every time that we die and we come to a new physical body, we create like a new facade, a new personality, which is formed by different things. And we are going to see them now, like our name, like a surname, like our education, like a culture, like our interest, like our cost, like our habits. In the past existence, I was another person. I was probably a guy. I had that name. I like certain kind of things, and I created a personality. And in this existence, I created a whole new personality. What happens? That personality is formed through imitation. What children see talking on the cell phone, and if he is like celebrated because of that, then the child begins to assimilate that behavior is appropriate. And the child begins to imitate the accent, the way of speaking, the gestures, but also begins to imitate the reactions of other people and begins to get a concept about what is right and what is wrong in what they do that other people do. And if we see, for example, that the mother screams all the time, gets angry, reacts violently, then the child internalizes internalize that this is a right way to act, and he will start like acting the same. And if he sees that the father all the time strives for money, and that the father looks down on people who don't have money, and what the child says, it begins to assume that not having money is something wrong, is something to be ashamed of, and so on. He grows and he imitates what he sees everybody doing, his friends from school, and other relatives, what he sees on television, now what he sees on YouTube, and that way he is creating a new personality. So the child begins to develop new concepts, ways in which he like identifies himself, and he starts to feel that I am like this. And from then on, he start like worshiping his personality, and we start like loving our personality. We start to be so identified with that way of being, with that we think we are, that we forget what we really are. I mean, while we were growing, and we were creating our personality, and we were like taking all those things to create like a way of being, we forgot that we are the consciousness, that we are actually the essence. And we started to say, I'm like this, and the best music is the one that I listen to, and the best country is mine, and the best football party is the one I like, or the best religion is the one I practice, and it's the true one, and a lot of other concepts that we can start to defend to death, because we start feeling that all those concepts are ourselves. And we start feeling that by defending these concepts, you are actually defending yourself, because you are losing total connection with your own spirit, with your own consciousness. That is what you really are, and you are identifying yourself with the personality. And there are some things that form the personality, as you can see here. Your name, your surname, your sex, your age, your education, the place where you were born, the language that you talk, the economic position, the concepts that you have, your habits, the fashion, because you see that the personality or the fashion of the personalities of today is very different to the fashion of old personalities. The rules of society also affect your personality. The fears that you have or that are imposed to you, the loss of your country, the job that you have, the profession or the titles that you achieved, etc. And what happens that personality has like multiple fractions. It has many ways of being, because it is like the vehicle for the ego to manifest. And the problem with personality is that it keeps us hypnotized. So with life, with the world, it keeps us like hypnotized with vanity, with money, with prestige, looking for luxuries to adorn our personality, looking to be famous, looking for people to like us, to say that we are the best, etc. Because we forgot totally what we really are, and we are so fascinated with this outer world and with the personality, and that made us forget our true divinity, our reality, that we are actually an essence, a being of light. But now we need to cut the fascination with the world. We need to cut that fascination with our personality, So we start developing what we really are, that is the essence. There are two types of personality. One is the active personality that is at the service of the ego every time, and is what most of us have. You see that, for example, lust wants to be manifested in us. The personality will look a way to make lust manifest, but in an appropriate way, because we need to keep our image, but we need to let lust manifest. For example, we see something that we like, and lust want to go, directly to have sex with that person. But the personality will look for a way to talk to that person, to seduce that person, to promise him love, fidelity, and who knows how many other things that are only like covering the real intention of the ego, that is go and have sex with that person. So the personality, the active personality, will always go to find a way to make the psychological I to manifest. And it is another type of personality, that is the one that we need to start like developing, that is a passive personality. And it start like developing in us when we learn not to be so reactionary, to not immediately go and do what the defect says, but to break down. When a desire manifests, you judge it. And for example, if someone proposes you, I don't know, shady business, for example, where you are going there, to earn a lot of money, but instead of reacting immediately, instead of letting that greedy self to start, saying things in your mind and making you feel a lot of emotion, instead of immediately going and saying yes, what you are gonna do, or say no because of your personality, or because what your parents would say, or how people will treat you if they discover you doing this kind of stuff, because that is the way the personality acts. What you do is that you stop and you reflect and you observe the defects that are manifesting in your mind as justifications, and you realize that they are manifestation of your thieving self, or if you greedy self, and you start eliminating them. And you also discover what is the defect that is afraid of doing that, even though you want to, but there is some defect that is afraid of doing that, and you discover that and you eliminate it. And when you start eliminating everything that is manifesting in you, you stop being so reactionary, and we are letting like a way to consciousness manifest. Because remember, consciousness is not about being good or about being bad. Consciousness is beyond good and evil. So every time we need to observe the bad defects, but also the good defects, the good intentions, because they are only hiding something. Because they are most of the time acting because of fear, and fear is like the lowest vibration. You can think that a good people is someone that is there vibrating with love and etc. And not at all, because being good doesn't mean that you are conscious, because most of the time you are good, but is out of fear. Out of fear of what others would say, out of fear of the consequences. And if you get to eliminate the good way and the bad way, then your consciousness will manifest. Then your essence will manifest. And what is the essence? The essence is in us what is real, what is true, and what is eternal, because it is immortal. It's the only thing that truly worth anything in us. It has been the same from the moment that we left the sacred absolute sun, and it is what we really are. Outside of the ego and the personality, that is actually what we are not. And contrary to the ego and the personality, the essence doesn't belong to time, doesn't die in time, but is eternal, is immortal, is permanent. It is not conditioned also by what others would say or by what others would think, but it will always act in a conscious way based on what is really fair, what is really useful, and what is really true. It will always seek for the awakening of all of our consciousness. We need to know that 100% of our consciousness is immortal, but our consciousness is divided into two parts. 3%, which is that part of light that you can see here, is only the 3% of your consciousness and is free and it is self-conscious. But there is also 97% of our essence that is currently trapped in each one of our defects. And when the essence is free, it is called consciousness because it already is conscious, it already has wisdom. And when it is still trapped within the ego, it is called essence because essence comes from innocence. And just because of its innocence, it was trapped by the ego. But with the purpose of being released to rescue wisdom. Because we don't have the ego just because. We actually have the ego for a purpose. I mean, we made a whole trip to come here, and we came creating thousands of details of our ego, and that was not just because, it was with a purpose. And that was at that 97% of innocence that we had get trapped within the ego, and there it is making like a mastery, like a course. It is knowing everything we are not to remember who we really are. So when we eliminate every single detail of our psychological defects and we are like freeing all that essence and we merge it with the 3%, it turns into consciousness. And well, what is the work that we have to do? First, let me explain this part. It is that the 3% of essence is actually present in the first years of our lives, but after the 7 years, when we have that personality created and the use of reason, their consciousness fall asleep. I mean, that 3% of free and self-conscious essence falls asleep because of the fascination of the personality. But 3% of that essence never gets trapped by the ego. So if right now you start like making yourself aware of the fascination that you currently have with your personality, and you start like refusing to act under the conditionings of your personality, you are going to start awakening your 3% of essence. And you do so by self-observing, eliminating your egos. Now, what does the essence look for? What is the job, let's say, of the consciousness? Well, is to sacrifice for humanity, to be born and to die. That is the work of our consciousness. So we need to learn about this work. So we start like doing the work of our consciousness. That is the only work that is going to help us to set free that 97% of essence that is trapped, to merge it with the 3%, and to make it awaken in love. The first work is the psychological death, which is to die. And that is about eliminating all our different ways of being by practicing the self-observation, by judging every manifestation in us, and by eliminating, by asking our Divine Mother to eliminate every single detail of the ego that we discover in us. That is the first work of our consciousness. The second work is to be born, which is practicing the spiritual birth. And that is practicing the suprasexuality that we learned in the lecture number 1, and that we also taught in the lecture number 10, where we talk about the creation of the 7 bodies. And well, the suprasexuality is about uniting sexually with our partner, and instead of spilling our sexual energy through orgasm and ejaculation, what we do is that we make our energy ascend through our spine, and that way all those liberated essences are going to come and are going to merge with the 3%, and our consciousness is going to be growing from 3% to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, until we get to have 100% of consciousness fully awakened. And the third factor, which is very important, is to sacrifice. That is another work of our consciousness, to sacrifice for humanity. And that is to develop the conscious love by helping others to also awaken, by sharing this knowledge that we are receiving for free and to anyone. So we give anyone the opportunity to also make the work of their consciousness and to get out of the slavery that the ego represents. That is the work of our essence. And well, actually, the only thing that I want to talk to you about now is to how to differentiate the ego, the personality, and the essence. And I'm going like to give you a simple example, so you get like to so you start like identifying when one is manifesting, one the other, and the other. Let's say example that we have here, that we go down the street and that we find someone that we didn't want to see because we owe that person some money. Okay, that is the situation. The ego, what is in that situation? The ego are all the reactions that arises within us, all the desires that we start feeling in that situation. In that situation, if we self-observe, we discover the desire to hide, the desire to lie, the desire and the annoyance, but also we feel anger about having found that person, the hatred that it generated in us, the shame is also another detail of the ego that is manifesting there. I already said the desire to lie to that person. All of that, all those are manifestations of the ego in this situation. Now, what is the personality? How does the personality or how can you discover what is the manifestation of the personality? There you see like the facade, like the mask that you that you put, and then even though you're feeling all those horrible feelings of annoyance, of I don't know, you feel ashamed, everything. But what you do, you go and you smile to that person, and you greet that person politely, and you ask that person about I don't know his family, how he's doing. Yeah, the weather is very good today, and that is your personality. When you put a pleasant face, and when that person asks you about the money, then you start to lie. Then you let the ego manifest, the personality start letting the ego manifest, and you do all a movie about that situation. You know that yeah, something terrible happened to you, whatever. That is the ego, and that is the personality. The personality is that mask that you put to others, that you pretend to be, so others think good about you, so others don't criticize you, etc. That is just an example. Actually, everybody has a different personality, but because there are certain kind of people that have a personality that is totally different, that go and say, you don't know what, fuck you, whatever. And that is another kind of personality, but it's also the personality. And it is like a more active personality that is letting like more easily the ego manifest, but it's also a personality. The thing is that you get to discover what is your own personality and how it acts, because that way you can get to eliminate all of that, so the essence can manifest. Because what is the essence? I mean, how can you or how could the essence um, act in that situation? Well, actually, we know that the essence is the real, the essence is the truth, and the essence, for that reason, is the unknown from moment to moment. So, if you start at that moment eliminating all the manifestation of the ego that you feel, if you observe the desire of lying, you eliminate the divine mother, eliminate this. You observe the desire to hide, you eliminate it. If you feel how your personality wants to start to act with that hypocrisy, and you eliminate it. That way, you are like making, you are clearing the path so the consciousness can manifest without any conditioning, nor from the ego, nor from the personality. And there you are going to act in a conscious way. And you are going to be able to resolve any situation in a conscious way. We cannot like pigeonhole this into a concept and say, well, the essence will do this, because the essence is on the unknown from moment to moment. You cannot make a concept out of the consciousness. You cannot like start figuring out with your mind what is the right way to act, because you are just making a concept, probably a good concept. No, the right way to act is saying the person the truth, or acting this way, or doing that, or doing that. But if you make it a pre-concept, you are just like letting a good defect to manifest. But if you have the courage to eliminate everything that is manifesting and letting yourself to experience the consciousness, letting yourself to experience the reality without any conditioning from your mind, without any conditioning of your personality or of your ego, you are going to start acting in life in a conscious way. That is going to surprise you, yeah, and it's probably going to surprise another people, but it is not something mechanical. Consciousness cannot be measured. Consciousness cannot be conceptualized. Consciousness is above good and evil and can only manifest when we eliminate the manifestations of our ego and when we make the personality passive. And that way consciousness is manifesting. And well, that is today's lecture. That is the explanation that I had for you for today. I hope that I made myself clear. But if you have any question about this topic, you know that you can leave any question that you have there in the comments, and I will gladly be solving any question that you have. And I'm always available also in the messenger here in the page to help you with any question that you have regarding this knowledge and regarding the whole topic and the course. And well, I want to invite you to our next lecture that we are going to see next Wednesday, and we will be talking about self-observation. So we are going to be learning how to develop that third eye, or that sense that will allow us to make radical changes within ourselves. And well, thank you very much to all of you, and see you the next time. Ciao, ciao.